do any day. We're with Mike, who's leaving home to protect his family and yours. We're with all service members and their families who need community, connection, and maybe a bit of magic. Are you with them? Learn more at uso.org today.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show on KBLA Talk 1580. What an amazing night we had last night in New York, in New Jersey, and in Virginia. And just like that, hope is born again. And that's the way we have to see this process. We're going to be overwhelmed with negative news from Donald Trump every single day. And then it happens. The spirit energy of the people takes over and amazing things begin to happen. Our very special guest in the next hour is CNN anchor Abby Phillip. In this hour, discussing her new book, A Dream Deferred, Jesse Jackson and the Fight for Black Political Power. But as you can imagine, her very hard and very difficult sought-after opinion and very important opinion on the events of last night have her tied up in the first hour. But she will be with us in the second hour for the entirety of it, I believe. A Dream Deferred, Jesse Jackson and the Fight for Black Political Power. And therefore, Reverend Dr. Todd Eury is coming from the second hour up to the first hour to share with us not only his handicap of what took place last night, but also his thoughts about Reverend Jesse Jackson and the long reach of the movement that he started some 40 years ago. Dr. Eury, welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Always good to be with you. I'm actually navigating the city, been in court today. So, just doing what we do out in these streets.
I want to give you an initial recap, at least for me, and I don't want our listeners to forget it either. The Mamdani coalition and wing of the Democratic Party won big last night. Hope is alive, Mamdani said. That's a nod to Jesse Jackson. The Cuomo wing of the Democratic Party lost. And I know that can get lost on us very, very quickly, but I'm going to say it again. The Cuomo wing of the Democratic Party lost twice. Once in the Democratic primary, and then it lost again in its sore loser strategy in the general election. The Cuomo wing also exposed a troubling alliance between Trump and Musk and dynasty politics with their last-minute endorsement of Cuomo. The Cuomo wing of the Democratic Party voted for the House resolution honoring Charlie Kirk. The New York City, Virginia, and New Jersey elections had rejection of Trump and MAGA in common. Mamdani's spirit and movement helped them, but those Democratic organizations did not help Mamdani. Neither gubernatorial candidate wanted to draw the ire of Trump's threats and retribution against Mamdani, unashamed defense of democratic socialism. The Democratic establishment leadership was slow to line up behind the future of the Democratic Party, too busy holding on to the past and to the present. By the way, democratic socialist values are largely associated theologically with the politics of Jesus of Nazareth. Feeding people, clothing people, housing people, educating people, providing health care for people, SNAP benefits, the Affordable Care Act are values largely identified with the ministry of Jesus Christ. The mood in the country may be strong enough to elect Democrats across the board, quite frankly, without eviscerating the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The Republican strategy of drawing lines to elect Republican members of Congress may not work against a blue wave of sentiment. The American people resoundingly said last night that Donald Trump has gone too far. We've got about a minute and a half before we come forward. Dr. Yuri, your sentiments on what we witnessed last night.
Well, we witnessed a bit of what your father showed us 40 years ago, that over and against the establishment must rise the emergent, because the establishment is only the establishment until it wanes. And there's actually a pivoting taking place within the body politic. The generation of the boomers and the busters, as the dominant, reliable voting class, is now yielding to millennials, Gen Zers, Gen Xers, and the like. And so the machine lost to the coalition. That's a big deal, because that means those who have been historically excluded from winning these elections are now the empowered, and now they get the benefit of being able to serve the interests of the people.
You know, Dr. Yuri, I was reading some amazing numbers, and we'll talk about them when we come forward. It says that newly registered voters, like the ones who helped power Zoran Mandami to his primary win, turned out in droves, while voters who aren't registered with the party were much likely to vote in early voting opportunities in the city of New York. It seems to me we're at that point where Democrats have given up on voter registration. And Jesse Jackson was the champion of voter registration. He understood the power of bringing new voters into the process. And last night, so did Zoran Mandami. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. More with Reverend Dr. Todd Yuri on Wealthy Wednesdays, the politics of our faith, on the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. More when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
While you're stuck in traffic, we can at least bring you up to speed on the news of the day. You're listening to Jesse Jackson Jr. only on KBLA Talk 1580.
All I need is one mic.
With a KBLA Talk 1580 editorial, I'm Tavis Smiley. Southern California Edison confirmed to show up this week for our Altadena Town Hall, but then they reneged on their promise. KBLA Talk 1580 organized a town hall specifically for Black Altadena residents, people whose homes, memories, and futures went up in smoke when SCE's equipment sparked the flames. This wasn't some ambush or gotcha moment. This was a community saying, we need answers. We need to understand how this so-called fast pay program actually works. We need to know if justice will ever reach us. And Edison said no. Let's be crystal clear about what that means. This wasn't a scheduling conflict. This was a choice that tells Black Altadena residents that even after the fire, even after the devastation, even after admitting fault through the settlement program, they still don't matter enough for a couple of hours of Edison's time. You know what takes courage? Facing people you harmed, sitting in a room and yes, live on talk radio with folks who lost everything because of your infrastructure failures and explaining how you intend to make it right. That takes backbone. That's what real accountability looks like. When you're the reason people lost everything, you don't get to cancel on survivors waiting for answers. You don't get to send your regrets to KBLA and call it a day. This is about respect, or rather, the complete lack of it. This is the same pattern of neglect that may have led to the fires in the first place, and now they're doubling down on disrespect in the aftermath. The residents of Altadena have endured enough hell, and now they are navigating the nightmare of settlement claims, trying to understand what they are actually entitled to receive. Southern California Edison, you owe Black Altadena more than money. You owe them your presence, your transparency, your time, and you owe KBLA Talk 1580 a public apology, I might add. And until we get it, we're going to keep emailing the top dog at SCE, Mr. Pedro Pizarro. His email is pedro.pizarro@sce.com. Pizarro spelled Pizarro. Pedro.pizarro@sce.com. Or you can call 626-302-2255 and then press the number 1. That's 626-302-2255 and then press the number 1 to speak to a live person and express yourself. With a KBLA Talk 1580 editorial, I'm Tavis Smiley, and as always, we welcome your feedback.
We're with Bridget, whose husband won't be home for months, and whose daughter is due any day. We're with Mike, who's leaving home to protect his family and yours. We're with all service members and their families who need community, connection, and maybe a bit of magic. Are you with them? Learn more at uso.org today.
I can't believe how spotless my floors look after using the Swiffer Power Mop. No more dragging around a heavy mop and messy bucket. Now I get the same deep clean without all the work. Thanks to the powerful solution and scrubbing pad of the Swiffer Power Mop, dirt and grime don't stand a chance, and I don't break a sweat. Mic drop. Mop drop.
Swiffer Power Mop. Swiffer Power Mop.
A smarter way to mop. Try it or your money back.
Now back to more of Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Our very special guest on this Wealthy Wednesday, Politics of Our Faith with Reverend Dr. S. Todd Urey. Dr. Urey, welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Good to be with you, my brother. There's a whole lot to talk about this week.
Todd, let me read to you something that Heidi Chu wrote on November 2nd, 2025 at 10:59 p.m. for The City in New York. She says, the tallies are in from the 9-day early voting period that ended Sunday afternoon. More than 732,000 New Yorkers have already turned out to cast their ballots, accounting for nearly 14% of the more than 5.3 million registered voters in the city, according to the city's analysis of the latest City Board of Elections data. 65% as many people have already voted this year as the 1,125,258 who voted together in the 2021's uncompetitive general election, where Democrat Eric Adams crushed Republican Curtis Sliwa, who is running again this year as the party's nominee. The 2025 early voting numbers suggest overall turnout could reach approximately 2 million people, a level the city hasn't come close to since David Dinkins and Rudy Giuliani faced off in 1989 and again in 1993. By the way, Jesse Jackson was very involved in the Dinkins campaign in 1989 and his voter registration efforts. Early voting peaked over the final weekend with 103,597 New Yorkers voting on Saturday and another 150,000 on Sunday, the two highest turnout days of the early voting period that began the previous weekend. Todd, let me ask you a question. I was talking to one of my political friends while we were out here in Chicago and in the streets registering people to vote. And he said, don't register voters here. Don't register voters here. And I said, why not? Because I got my voters. I know who's going to turn out on election day. I got my voters. The political establishment does not want new voters in the process because the new voters make demands of the political process and their representatives that those voters who became, I want to say lackluster, but they became docile in the process, don't make. And politicians are afraid of new voters. Todd, share us the wisdom of why voter registration, putting new wine into some old skins, is important for this party.
Well, it's a math problem. It's always a math problem. incumbency brings with it complacency very often. And so whenever we've seen low voter turnout, it has often been to the benefit of the incumbent and the detriment of the constituent. And so constituents become disappointed and then disaffected. And that just kind of protects and insulates any obligation for the elected representatives to do on behalf of the people. Then they can focus on special interests. They can focus on just kind of running away from issues. And so what new voters do, it's like kindling to a fire. That if your fire's hot and the wood burns down, if you don't remove the ash and put some new kindling in there, you're going to have a hard time starting another fire. And so we have to keep fresh kindling. That's actually out of the book when the instruction about keeping a fresh fire on the hearth of the altar says the priest is to take off the priestly garments, put on the outer garments after removing the ash from the altar, placing it on the side. Then they take the ash out of the camp, out of the midst of the people, to return with fresh fire, because ash actually suffocates ideas and ideals. And so new voters are kindling to what otherwise is what we used to call in the country an ashy situation, and nobody's passing out lotion or Vaseline.
I'm wondering why the party itself doesn't see the wisdom of both Jesse Jackson and, in this case, Mamdani, and registering voter as a priority. I've not seen it really since Reverend's been sick. He was kind of the outside agitator for voter registration in high schools, in churches, at public events, deputizing registrars, bringing new people into the process. But the Democratic Party has turned its back on the idea of new voters, and I think for the very same reasons that you've suggested. That new kindling brings new fire, new desire for representation. More needs need to be addressed, and quite frankly, the establishment just doesn't want to hear it.
Here's the issue. We have to remember the Democratic Party of today isn't the Democratic Party that it is because it wanted to become that. In 1983 and 1984, they were forced to become more expansive, more inclusive. They were forced to be more focused on those who live on the margins, because there was a movement afoot that was likely to destabilize party politics writ large in the candidacy of Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. And so the reason the Democratic Party is reluctant is because it's just a slight modification to the Republican Party in many instances. They nibble on either side of moderation. No one's trying to do anything that's really transformative, except you get these, extreme fringe battles back and forth, but no one's really dealing with the substantive issues. And so if they can stay in the comfort zone, which is somewhere in the middle, right? It's kind of like lukewarm in Revelation, right? You're neither hot nor cold. I need you to make up your mind so I can figure out how to deal with you. That's kind of our brand of politics. When new people come in, they force you to have to make a decision. Either you're with it or you're not. And so the reason the parties don't want to keep bringing new voices in is it forces them to stay connected to the needs of those who are not necessarily going to be your big donors. They're not necessarily going to be your high net worth individuals. They're going to be the folks that keep you grounded to the reality of the masses of people. And too often those who get elected to go into office would rather have amnesia than be relevant.
Todd, I see the spirit of Mamdani in Virginia, and I certainly see it obviously in New Jersey. But the organizations of Virginia and the organizations of New Jersey and the leadership within the Democratic Party was slow to embrace the movement of Mamdani in New York City. Slow to embrace, if at all. In fact, Hakeem Jeffries came on board late, but he did come on board to his credit. Chuck Schumer sat it out, and other mainline Democrats, interest groups, and organizations allied with Cuomo, who lost in the Democratic primary, mounted another bid in the general election, and is a two-time sore loser, along with the interests that supported him. They were wrong both times. But the way in which the media is actually reporting it, it looks like a big Democratic sweep, Mamdani, New Jersey, New York, without acknowledging that what Mamdani did was unique in this process. Maybe in New Jersey, maybe in Virginia, no kings, authoritarianism, a movement that definitely has strength in that context. And don't get me wrong, I get the overlap. I'm just talking about the granular details of victory over the establishment that has currency at this hour for bringing new energy into the Democratic Party.
I love the way you frame it because you're so idealistic. Listen, man, the media has been the protective cover for moderation and lack of progress in ways that we can't even begin to discuss. Because at the end of the day, the media does not want to disrupt money flow. They're part of the corporate welfare structure. So that's the first thing. The second thing is it's not the media's testimony. Those were people's wins last night. The people get to decide how they want to tell that story, and they should, and then make the media cover it as opposed to having the media interpret it. And so if we reclaim the narrative of the morning after, while they're running exit polls and trying to anticipate what might be the outcome, while you're seeing your trends, you're looking at your ground game, you're looking at how many ballots have been issued during certain parts of the day compared to the same precinct the last voting cycle. If you have that kind of proficiency and intentionality, then it was a shock to everybody except the campaigns, at least should have been. And I will remind you that the ice didn't crack in 2008 around Barack Obama's candidacy until John Lewis broke ranks and decided that he was going to go in a different direction because the establishment was dictating who was going to be the most qualified and therefore most relevant candidate on behalf.
You know, I want to go back to Heidi Chu for just a moment. The voter registration numbers were very impressive for Mamdani. It's clear that those voter registration numbers are not attributable to Eric Adams. Just no one registered to vote because of Eric Adams. It doesn't get more simple than that. Silwa did not motivate anyone new to vote. Cuomo did not motivate or inspire anyone to vote. There's a uniqueness in Mamdani and his movement that is like Jesse Jackson's, that motivated people into the process. He gave them hope. He walked the streets of New York. He touched the people.
Stay right there.
The stories that he told last night were so personal that he knew the names of the cab drivers and the bakery owners and the bagel shops. And he promised them that he was going to take them to City Hall with them. Dr. Yuri?
You cannot inspire people that you are afraid to meet. We often use rhetoric as what we think is the frame of inspiration. It's not rhetoric. It's actually connection. It was connection for Jesse Jackson in 84 and 88 when he was on Southern Crusades and getting off that bus and then walking around, hugging the teachers, high-fiving, doing all of those things that made folks feel relevant as opposed to being merely transactional. Inspiration happens in the mode and the model of what we saw from Mamdani. And that's what the Democratic Party has to learn, because what we're seeing on the other side, albeit in a whole different kind of toxicity, is the same kind of principle, but it's committed to a totally different outcome.
and the outcome is evident. Is it possible from your expectations that we're going to see the spirit of Mamdani in other elections, more 30-somethings, 40-somethings bringing forward the voter registration energy and hope? We have about 2 minutes, Todd, before we come forward.
That momentum, first of all, it's got to extend far beyond a Mamdani. We got to figure out how to get more Mamdanis across the country. But that's the only thing that's going to save us from this downward spiral of mid-decade redistricting because we're trying to game the system. We've got work to do. And if we don't learn from what we saw last night, we're going to be trapped in a spiral that we won't soon recover.
I think that's right. I'm excited about Mamdani's victory. I'm excited about the leadership that he showed last night. I'm excited about the inspiration that he provided the nation in his acceptance speech. I think he went one point after the other in a textbook new approach to reaching out to voters, inspiring people, and bringing them in the process. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr., listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show on KBLA Talk 1580. More when we come forward with Dr. S. Todd Yeary on Wealthy Wednesdays and the politics of our faith.
The biggest names, the best conversations. You're riding with Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Amber Payton with BIN News Now. California voters overwhelmingly passed Proposition 50, approving a new congressional map that could give Democrats 5 extra House seats next year.
What is really important in our country is that we have a check and a balance on this White House.
That's Black Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, who says voters sent a clear message to President Trump. New York Fire Department Commissioner Robert Tucker is stepping down. He submitted his resignation to Black Mayor Eric Adams effective December 19th. The move comes as Mayor-elect Zoran Mamdani plans to keep some of Adams' top officials, including current NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch. And Sean Diddy Combs is reportedly telling fellow inmates he expects a presidential pardon from Donald Trump in 2026. TMZ says the imprisoned mogul serving 50 months for violating the Mann Act has been bragging about his release plans. Get BIN News Now on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
Compassion sponsorship means food, healthcare, education, and most of all, being known, loved, and protected. There are thousands of kids waiting over a year. End their wait. Sponsor a child. Compassion sponsorship means food, healthcare, education, and most of all, being known, loved, and protected. There are thousands of kids waiting over a year. End their wait. Sponsor a child with compassion today. Text the word radio to 83393.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Lakers are back in action tonight at Crypto.com. They get their first look this season at Victor Wembanyama and a very improved San Antonio Spurs team. The Spurs are 5-1. The 7'5" Wembanyama leads the NBA in block shots and ranks second in rebounding. 7 o'clock tip-off tonight on ESPN. The USC women's basketball team won their season opener Tuesday night. The Trojans beat New Mexico State 87-48. It's going to be a very different season for the Trojans. They will not have All-American Juju Watkins for the entire season. Doctors advised the Compton native to sit out the season to give her right knee a chance to heal completely. Watkins suffered a torn ACL in the second round of the NCAA tournament in March. Without Watkins, the Trojans are not expected to be a contender for the national championship. The Trojans are ranked number 18 in the preseason top 25 poll. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, a.k.a. the voice of reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the voice of reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach. Is someone you love struggling with addiction and mental illness? Is improving your family's health important? Want to leave a legacy that your family can grow? Are you ready to enhance your perception of life experiences? Then wake up weekends at 7 a.m. with Urban Family Focus and get the wisdom, opportunity, resources, and motivation to live your best life. Join the conversation on Urban Family Focus Saturday and Sunday at 7 a.m.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Open enrollment is your opportunity to choose a plan that connects you to Providence's comprehensive healthcare network. Choose a plan that includes Providence and gain access to a dedicated team of highly trained primary care physicians and specialists. From nationally recognized doctors and hospitals, Providence ensures quality care is always within reach. When you choose Providence, you choose after-hours care through our nurse advice line, urgent care, or virtual express care. You choose 24/7 access through the Providence mobile app to message providers, request prescription refills, schedule appointments, check lab results, and more. This open enrollment, prioritize your well-being with the peace of mind that comes from choosing a provider that values excellence and compassionate care. Don't just choose a plan. Choose a plan dedicated to health equity and community engagement. Choose a plan that believes health is a human right. Choose a plan that delivers exceptional care and cares about your community. Choose a plan that offers Providence. Visit chooseprovidence.org to learn more.
You ready?
You're invited to the KBLA Talk 1580 Community Health and Wellness Fair on Saturday, November 8th, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Catch at Audubon Middle School in Leimert Park, 4120 11th Avenue. Join us for a day of health, healing, and community connection. There will be health screenings, immunizations, wellness information, a Catch Charter School recruitment fair, plus music and healthy snacks. And it's all free at the KBLA Talk 1580 Community Health and Wellness Fair, Saturday, November 8th, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Audubon Middle School in Leimert Park, 4120 11th Avenue. Come out and bring the entire family. And if you have not yet checked out our KBLA Health and Wellness Hub, you should at KBLA1580.com. KBLA Talk 1580 thanks Catch Charter School, Prudential, Eastside, Cedar Sinai, and St. John's Community Health. At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that a healthy community is a thriving community.
That's right, baby.
You're listening to Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. In the next hour on Wealthy Wednesdays, American journalist Abby Phillip was born on November 25th, 1988 in Alexandria, Virginia, with a Bachelor of Arts degree in government from Harvard University. Her career began covering the Obama White House for Politico. Abby's career path led her to ABC News as a digital reporter for politics, followed by a tenure at the Washington Post as a national political reporter before joining CNN in 2017. Very much looking forward to having a conversation with Abby on her new book, A Dream Deferred, Jesse Jackson and the Fight for Black Political Power. I'm very excited about that book. But in this hour on Wealthy Wednesdays, Dr. S. Todd Yeary, our favorite pastor and lawyer, 1 foot in the pulpit and 1 foot in the courtroom, keeping it real for us and handicapping the elections in New York, New Jersey, and Virginia. Dr. Yeary, welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. I think I have Dr. Yeary muted. Dr. Yeary is still muted. So, while I work out the technical issue with Dr. Yeary, whom I can't hear at this moment, I just want to say that when I reflect back upon Abby's work, which I want to spend some time reflecting with her on, I'm so impressed with the way in which she approached this project. The early part of her book, which I completed about 3 days ago, she talks about my father's early rearing. And it's often part of the story that's missed in terms of what it is that makes up who Jesse Jackson is, who he became, what motivated him in the early stages of his life that ultimately led to the dynamic leadership that has defined democratic and progressive politics for the last 50 years in this nation. More about that when we come forward in the next hour. But Todd, welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, I can hear you. Can I hear you now? I can hear you now.
Can you hear me talking? Can you hear me
I
talking?
can hear you talking. Hey, man, check this out, Dr. Yeary. Can we dig a little deeper into what the message was that should be received by the central nervous system of the Democratic Party from the victories last night?
Yeah, I mean, let's look at it. I think the first thing is the reminder that the people control the politic, not the politicians. So when you have all of this gaming, we don't like the incumbent, but we certainly don't like the leading challenger who's emerging. But we want more of the same, just in a different form, presence, appearance. Then they start shuffling the board. That's kind of the way machine politics has always kind of worked. But when the machine is breaking down, it's like, all right, your car is smooth when it's new. When it's 20 years old, a generation old, and it's hard to find parts when they wear out, somebody's going to come along with a new ride. And so we're getting into new ride politics where you've got some fresh drivers who are first-time voters or maybe re-engaged voters who have been disaffected. And they are deciding that they will no longer relent in allowing others to define what the conversation needs to be. And I think you're starting to see it even in terms of some of the tenor in the hearing today at the Supreme Court on the tariff thing. Because as I understand it, both sides of that bench was not even hearing a whole lot of that, right? So while courts are supposed to be apolitical, they're not in a bubble. They understand that there's a shift going on, and then we should begin to see that not only does it change what happens at the voting booth, it should change everything that happens as a result of what happens at the voting booth. And we just have to make sure that our work doesn't stop just on election day. We've got to keep the pressure on between election days. That's the next phase of this conversation, because this cannot be a one and done. Otherwise, we will look up in just a few short days and we'll be back to business as usual, or apathy will have set in, frustration will have set in, and the minority will still be controlling the dominant conversation.
Todd, I was listening to the former chairman of the RNC last night, who, by the way, over time has become far more moderate, left of center, quite frankly. And he argued, I thought fairly effectively last night, that with all of this talk about redrawing congressional districts, and as you stated, gaming the system with new congressional lines and state representative and state senatorial lines, the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter where the lines are or who's in the lines. If the voters are feeling some type of way about what's going on in America, these red pockets could suddenly become Democratic pockets literally overnight if the pain reaches a threshold that creates an impact on the central nervous system that has what I think I heard Van Jones talk about, buyer's remorse last night.
Yeah, so these lines, let's talk about these lines. The lines that mattered were the lines of voters. I'm actually getting out of
the Uber, but I know I can walk and talk. So that becomes a different kind of discussion. We start looking at drawing lines based on who we think are likely to participate in the voting process. And that's looking at historical data, not emergent data. Thanks, man. Appreciate you so much. Good to see you. Thank you. And so this whole thing about let's redraw the lines so that we can have more favorable outcomes is based on a certain assumption that based on the number of registered voters by party and based on historical data about who typically votes, we want to be able to anticipate that we can protect this seat or that seat, hoping that the numbers of folks who don't participate stays in a relatively predictable range as well. The minute you shift that, all assumptions go away. That's how you ended up with 45 and 47, because he was anti-establishment from the beginning. And so his message wasn't for them. His message was for the disaffected. And it was unconventional to those of us who were critiquing it, but he wasn't looking for a critique. He was looking to win. So it's nonsense to us, but he ain't talking to us. So when we think about this, and think about what the Democratic Party needs to get out of it, is they need to learn how to speak the language of the people consistently and credibly, and then the rest of it will work out, because what we tend to find is that when you're clear on messaging, at least from the kind of Democratic Party politics, coalition-based politics that we learned from Reverend, you also appeal to folks who have no official political affiliation, but they still actively engaged. We call them independents. That's why we got to have this conversation, this moving the maps, because what happened? You move the maps and then the people move. What good does that do?
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You're listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show on KBLA Talk 1580. This is Wealthy Wednesdays with Dr. S. Todd Yeary. More when we come forward on the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
While you're stuck in traffic, we can at least bring you up to speed on the news of the day. You're listening to Jesse Jackson Jr. only on KBLA Talk 1580.
Protect yourself from Medicare card scams. Scammers may call, email, or even knock on your door claiming they need your Medicare info, asking for money or threatening to cancel your benefits. Don't fall for it. It's a scam. Remember, Medicare doesn't need to verify your information. They already have it. Medicare won't charge you for a new card and will never threaten to cancel benefits. Check your Medicare statements for suspicious charges and report scams to the California Senior Medicare Patrol at 1-855-613-7080. We're here to help.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. Worried about eviction? You have rights, and Stay Housed LA can help. Stay Housed LA is a partnership between LA County, the City of Los Angeles, and local service providers. From Lancaster to Long Beach, we're here to help you with tenant education workshops, legal clinics, free legal services for eligible tenants, and online resources about tenant protection laws. Don't face eviction alone. Call our hotline at 1-888-694-0040. That's 1-888-694-0040. Or visit stayhousedla.org. Stay Housed LA, keeping Los Angeles residents in their homes. Stay Housed LA, your rights, your home, our community. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Hear that? That's the sound of your life. Perfectly imperfect. Beating in rhythm to the world you've created. But every time you drive after drinking, music gets drowned out. Your life sounds pretty great. Don't let a buzz ruin it. Buzz driving is drunk driving. Don't drive buzzed. A message from NHTSA and the Ad Council.
An official message from Medicare. Couple more minutes and we'll start this month's book club. You know, I usually love a plot twist, but this year, I'm comparing my options during Medicare open enrollment.
You can't assume your current health or drug plan is the best one for you.
And you got to make sure your drugs are covered. That's important.
So is saving money. Review all your options at Medicare.gov. Open enrollment ends December 7th. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Now back to more of Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome to KBLA Talk 1580, our very special guest on Wealthy Wednesdays, the politics of our faith, Reverend Dr. S. Todd Eury. Dr. Eury, welcome forward to the show. Dr. Eury? So I'm wondering, and I'm giving some reflection to what are we going to do as a party as a new generation seeks entry, seeks to have its voices heard, not as staff members, but as elected officials. I don't see it as a bad thing. I mean, I see it as new energy coming into the process that's absolutely necessary with new ideas. But I also see it as something that has to be balanced. Jim Clyburn, for example, fighting to keep his congressional district in the state of Virginia intact. The state of South Carolina intact. It matters to his historical memory and to the historical memory of our people in that Democratic primary and presidential processes come through South Carolina. And his opinion does matter. And hopefully the district is still there. The next congressman's opinion matters for the direction of African-American politics, as well as it heads into Super Tuesday during that conflict and that test, and that the contest between multiple candidates who are normally in the Democratic primary at that time. I'm wondering, how do you strike the balance between historical memory and the new energy that the young people are bringing to the process?
Well, they have to maintain dynamic conversation. Youthful energy that is not historically informed fades quickly because you expect immediate return for short-term investment. And so we didn't just get here overnight. Literally, centuries of struggle, generation by generation invested in keeping the momentum going so that where we find ourselves today, if we know our history, is not where our forebears found themselves as we come up on the 250th anniversary of the country next year. And so it's important that we have these ongoing dialogues, lest we forget, right? Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee, lest our hearts,
drunk with the wine
of the world, we forget thee. We can't practice an intoxicated politics. It's got to be sober-minded and it's got to be focused. And so if we don't keep that in mind, what they will do, they being the oppressor class, that's not a party. That's not red or blue. That's what makes the system the system. When we talk about systemic hostility, systemic racism, that's not party affiliation. They penetrate both parties. They just dress different. So if we're not serious about being current on our history, we're going to be misguided in our current politics. And they'll just wait us out so that they can come back and take over. That's the only way you get to this dude being in the White House a second time.
Todd, you know,
is that we played the nut role and forgot our history.
I was saying the people of Los Angeles and the people of California are we're all so particularly proud of them. They waited in lines with simply one measure on the ballot and voted in extraordinary numbers under the leadership of Gavin Newsom and Maxine Waters, who's been right here on this radio station advocating the support of Prop 50 to give a temporary but meaningful redrawing process to allow Democrats the opportunity to balance what Donald Trump is trying to do in Congress. And I got to take my hat off to the people in range of KBLA, in range of our voices, for the extraordinary leadership that they are showing the nation at this hour in defense of the Republic and in defense of our democracy. Todd, your thoughts on that?
It was a necessary tactical move. I'm not sold that it's going to provide long-term strategic benefit. It is to counter what we sense is an immediate assault that is going to come with some very difficult outcomes if we don't put up a firewall. But I think what goes along with it is I think we make some assumptions or presumptions that are not necessarily tested. We talked in an earlier segment about Mamdani going to where the people are, having a conversation. A lot of times folks claim party affiliation based on family tie, not necessarily by any familiarity with what the policy positions are, right? There was a joke back when President Obama was in the White House and the Affordable Care Act had been passed. And, they were doing surveys and they would ask some folks, well, how do you feel about Obamacare? Well, I don't like Obamacare. I wish we get rid of Obamacare. And then turn around, the next question would be, well, how do you feel about the Affordable Care Act? I love it. I wish we could expand it. They're the same thing.
They're the same thing.
So they're the same thing. One is the branding of the thing. The other is the title of the bill, right? So it is that kind of, we got to.
I've actually shared that on the
Go
show.
for
I never voted for Obamacare. And I was the debate over the Affordable Care Act was 8 hours. The Republicans were very disruptive and they sought to disrupt the entire proceedings. Nancy Pelosi came up with the idea that every member of the caucus would get 10 minutes to be speaker. After about 6 members had that opportunity, and I had the first opportunity, I went back up to my office to take a nap. I get this call about an hour into the debate. Democrats had lost control of the floor under that process. The speaker asked me to come back down, reestablished order, and for 5 hours, I stood on my feet and controlled the House chamber for the Affordable Care Act. Affordable Care Act, the ACA. It was never named Obamacare. I did not vote for Obamacare. I voted for the Affordable Care Act. I voted for the Supplemental Nutrition and Assistance Program. I didn't vote for something called SNAP. I voted for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And what both programs are designed to do is to eliminate poverty for people who work 1, 2, 3 jobs. And at the end of 1, 2, 3 jobs, they have no health care. So it needs to be made affordable with a government subsidy to afford the care. And folks who work 1, 2, 3 and more jobs ought to be able to have something to eat at the end of 3 jobs. And that's the nature of about 1/5 of the nation that find themselves in chronic poverty without these programs. The marketing, Todd, to your point, the marketing.
So you'll appreciate this, right? There are folks who have to be technically proficient. They have to be caught up in details. We also have to be very good with having succinct, targeted conversations where folks can get a sense of what's needed from the elevator pitch. So on Sunday morning, I stand up every Sunday and I give the benefit of all of my waxing poetic for my study during the week. And after I go through all of my sermonic development, and I do my historical exegesis and my social analysis, and then I reach the climax and go by Calvary and make sure that I get him up early on Sunday morning. When I get to the line after the service, if you were to ask most of the folks that are listening to me what the pastor preach on, they're going to remember the hook. They're not going to remember the verse. And so we have to be able to have that kind of nuanced dialogue, technical and detailed where it's necessary, succinct and precise when it's most efficient. Because at the end of the day, hope was birthed last night. And here's where I want to leave it with the word of hope, because I'm looking at the clock. And I want to hear what Abby's got to say. In the verse from our national anthem, stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. That this journey has been long and hard. It's hard when hope dies before it's even birthed. Something was birthed last night. We've got to nurture it. We've got to cultivate it. We got to grow it. We got to expand it. And we got to work it.
There's no doubt in my mind, Dr. Uri, that hope was born last night. It certainly was given a new breath of life. And Mamdani even said himself, hope is alive, which I took to mean a nod to the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Our very special guest in the next hour is going to be none other than Abby Phillip, whose new book, A Dream Deferred, Jesse Jackson and the Fight for Black Political Power, could not have been written at a more important time in the nation's discourse over where do we go from here, chaos or community. I'm confident that this book that I just finished 3 days ago certainly points us in a very, very important direction. And I'm so grateful that Miss Phillip is going to join us for the next hour or for whatever portion of the time that she can spend with us. I am so grateful to you, Dr. Uri, for Wealthy Wednesdays. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You've been listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. When we come forward, more with Abby Phillip when we come forward.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Amber Payton with BIN News Now. California voters overwhelmingly passed Proposition 50, approving a new congressional map that could give Democrats 5 extra House seats next year.
What is really important in our country is that we have a check and a balance on this White House.
That's Black Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, who says voters sent a clear message to President Trump. New York Fire Department Commissioner Robert Tucker is stepping down. He submitted his resignation to Black Mayor Eric Adams effective December 19th. The move comes as Mayor-elect Zoran Mamdani plans to keep some of Adams' top officials, including current NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch. And Sean Diddy Combs is reportedly telling fellow inmates he expects a presidential pardon from Donald Trump in 2026. TMZ says the imprisoned mogul serving 50 months for violating the Mann Act has been bragging about his release plans. Get BIN News Now on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
Compassion sponsorship means food, healthcare, education, and most of all, being known, loved, and protected. There are thousands of kids waiting over a year. End their wait. Sponsor a child with compassion today. Text the word radio to 83393.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Lakers are back in action tonight at Crypto.com. They get their first look this season at Victor Wembanyama and a very improved San Antonio Spurs team. The Spurs are 5-1. The 7'5" Wembanyama leads the NBA in block shots and ranks second in rebounding. 7 o'clock tip-off tonight on ESPN. The USC women's basketball team won their season opener Tuesday night. The Trojans beat New Mexico State 87-48. It's going to be a very different season for the Trojans. They will not have All-American Juju Watkins for the entire season. Doctors advised the Compton native to sit out the season to give her right knee a chance to heal completely. Watkins suffered a torn ACL in the second round of the NCAA tournament in March. Without Watkins, the Trojans are not expected to be a contender for the national championship. The Trojans are ranked number 18 in the preseason top 25 poll. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
If you missed the recent Left Coast Forum, then you really missed out. An insightful presentation from Professor Richard Wolff, a call to action from LA Mayor Karen Bass, an insider's view on Prop 50 and the government shutdown from Congresswoman Sidney Kamlager-Dove, and as usual, Dr. Cornel West brought down the House with a powerful closing keynote. And many of the plenary sessions were standing room only. Check out our social media posts for photos and video of what you missed at the Left Coast Forum and make plans to attend one of our upcoming events. Our next Altadena Town Hall is Thursday, November 6th, 4 to 6 p.m. at Victory Bible Church in Pasadena. We're going to interrogate SoCal Edison's settlement fund and see what's really going on with this fire recovery program. And our KBLA Talk 1580 Community Health and Wellness Fair is Saturday, November the 8th, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. right here in Lemert Park at Catch at Audubon Middle School. All the details about these upcoming events can be found at our website, KBLA1580.com. So thanks again to all those who supported the Left Coast Forum, and a special thanks to our partners this year: the LA Progressive, the Empowerment Congress, Community Coalition, Southwest Voter Registration Education Project, Partnership for Growth, UTLA, LA Care Health Plan, Black Progressive Action Coalition, St. John's Community Health, the National Lawyers Guild, the Weingart Foundation, and the Liberty Hill Foundation.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show on KBLA Talk 1580. Abby Phillip was born on November 25th, 1988 in Alexandria, Virginia. The Bachelor's of Arts degree in government from Harvard University. Her career began covering the Obama White House for Politico. Abby's career path led her to ABC News as a digital reporter for politics, followed by a tenure at the Washington Post as a national political reporter. Before joining CNN in 2017, at CNN, she initially covered the Trump administration and later ascended to senior political correspondent and anchor roles, notably moderating CNN's Democratic presidential debate in Iowa in January of 2020 and anchoring special coverage of the 2020 election. Recognized for her contributions to journalism, Abby was named in 2021 Times 100 Next list and received the National Urban League's Women of Power Award. In 21, Phillip became the anchor of the weekend edition of Inside Politics. In 2023, she earned her own nightly show, CNN Newsnight with Abby Phillip. Abby, welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Thank you so much for having me. Good to see you.
Abby, I am so glad to have you on our show, and I am so glad that you wrote this book about my father, who I think of and try to think of as objectively as possible because of the subject nature of a father-son relationship. But I just want to share with you that I am so proud of this book and the attention that you paid to the detail of his early life all the way through, quite frankly, the turning point, quite possibly in American politics, certainly in progressive politics in this nation. So kudos to you and congratulations.
Well, thank you. And thank you for being a part of it, for helping me, in some key moments in the process. And I also should say that you're allowed to be biased about your father. That's okay. We'll take it.
Abby, as we think about the reflections upon what took place last night in New York, in New Jersey, and in Virginia, and I think specifically about that moment in Mom Donnie's speech where he said, "Hope is alive," which I took to mean a nod to Jesse Jackson. There's so much about the early rearing of Jesse Jackson that you studied in profound detail that ultimately manifests itself in the shakeup, or if you will, the makeup of the man that he would become.
Yeah.
Share with us your interest in why you started there.
It took a while in the process of writing this book to come to terms with just the fact that you do have to go all the way back. I mean, I think this book was conceived as a historical look at these 1984 and 1988 campaigns, but in part by talking to people who know him very well, including you and other members of your family, his close friends and proteges and so on. Everyone points back to the same thing, which is that you really cannot understand the man without understanding how he came up through Greenville, South Carolina, how he found his voice as an activist, trying to take out a book at the local library and realizing that that was still a place where racism and Jim Crow was being manifested, and then deciding in a really pivotal moment in his life to do something about it. And I do think that that series of actions, his relentless decisions to act and to be present in these key moments of our history, whether they were big or small, is one of the most important characteristics of the man. He just always was willing to go there, to force the issue, to put himself in the circumstance. And that is why ultimately, when the question was raised, who is going to run in 1984, that's why ultimately the answer for him eventually was that he would run.
I think I know that to be absolutely the case. And that early rearing, that end of the Jim Crow period, and then obviously Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954, as he comes into a kind of awareness, while maybe not date specific, it certainly reflects someone whose entire journey occurred during Second Reconstruction. And now the baton, in a profound way, is really being passed to a new generation. I think you saw some of that last night. Abby, your thoughts on what took place last night?
Yeah, I do think that last night, and particularly in New York, where I spent most of the night at the Zohran Mamdani headquarters, anchoring from there. It feels very much like a reclamation for parts of the Democratic coalition who have felt really left behind by the system over the last several years. And I do think in Mamdani, you have a candidate who, as I've said publicly before, is, whether he knows it or not, operating in the mold of Jesse Jackson's style politics, both in terms of the kind of economic message, but also the unifying message. And when you listen to his speech last night and you hear him calling out, the diversity of the city of New York and the workers who have burns on their hands from working as line cooks in the kitchen and cuts on their hands from cutting open boxes on the factory floor, it's a message that is geared toward the working class. And his ability, Mamdani has done something that I think most other modern politicians have not actually been able to do. He's taken this city that is very diverse, that is massive and complicated, and he's settled on this message of affordability that has ultimately unified enough of a majority of New Yorkers that he was able to win the mayoralty. And when you look even more closely at the numbers, you see the progress that he made from the primary to the general. He got Black voters, young voters, even middle class New Yorkers who are actually also struggling in a city that feels unaffordable to them. And I think so much of that is something that is the sort of dual mandate of the Jesse Jackson project. It is both the economic message and the unity around identity, without identity becoming the only thing that matters. And I do think that Mamdani, in one small way, has been able to achieve what many Democratic politicians haven't. And some of it is unique to the fact that New York is a specific place, right, that is more amenable to this kind of progressive politics. But it is a significant moment, I think, for the rest of the party to understand what it can look like when you have both of those two things working hand in hand with a candidate who also happens to be very charismatic and have a real political skill that is also pretty rare.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr., listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Our very special guest is none other than Abby Phillips, CNN anchor, political reporter. This is KBLA Talk 1580. More with Abby on her new book, A Dream to Forge, Jesse Jackson, The Fight for Black Political Power, when we come forward.
It's afternoon drive time with Jesse Jackson Jr. Only on KBLA Talk 1580.
All I need is one mic.
With a KBLA Talk 1580 editorial, I'm Tavish Smiley. Southern California Edison confirmed to show up this week for our Altadena Town Hall, but then they reneged on their promise. KBLA Talk 1580 organized a town hall specifically for Black Altadena residents, People whose homes, memories, and futures went up in smoke when SCE's equipment sparked the flames. This wasn't some ambush or gotcha moment. This was a community saying, we need answers. We need to understand how this so-called fast pay program actually works. We need to know if justice will ever reach us. And Edison said no. Let's be crystal clear about what that means. This wasn't a scheduling conflict. This was a choice that tells Black Altadena residents that even after the fire, even after the devastation, even after admitting fault through the settlement program, they still don't matter enough for a couple of hours of Edison's time. You know what takes courage? Facing people you've harmed, sitting in a room and yes, live on talk radio with folks who lost everything because of your infrastructure failures and explaining how you intend to make it right. That takes backbone. That's what real accountability looks like. When you're the reason people lost everything, you don't get to cancel on survivors waiting for answers. You don't get to send your regrets to KBLA and call it a day. This is about respect, or rather, the complete lack of it. This is the same pattern of neglect that may have led to the fires in the first place. And now they're doubling down on disrespect in the aftermath. The residents of Altadena have endured enough hell. And now they are navigating the nightmare of settlement claims, trying to understand what they are actually entitled to receive. Southern California Edison, you owe Black Altadena more than money. You owe them your presence, your transparency, your time, and you owe KBLA Talk 1580 a public apology, I might add. And until we get it, we're going to keep emailing the top dog at SCE, Mr. Pedro Pizarro. His email is pedro.pizarro@sce.com. Pizarro spelled Pizarro. Pedro.pizarro@sce.com. Or you can call 626-302-2255 and then press the number 1. That's 626-302-2255 and then press the number 1 to speak to a live person and express yourself. With a KBLA Talk 1580 editorial, I'm Tavis Smiley, and as always, we welcome your feedback.
We're with Bridget, whose husband won't be home for months, and whose daughter is due any day. We're with Mike, who's leaving home to protect his family and yours. We're with all service members and their families who need community, connection, and maybe a bit of magic. Are you with them? Learn more at uso.org today.
I can't believe how spotless my floors look after using the Swiffer Power Mop. No more dragging around a heavy mop and messy bucket. Now I get the same deep clean without all the work. Thanks to the powerful solution and scrubbing pad of the Swiffer Power Mop, dirt and grime don't stand a chance, and I don't break a sweat. Mic drop. Mop drop.
Swiffer Power Mop. Swiffer Power Mop.
A smarter way to mop. Try it or your money back.
Now back to more of Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Our very special guest in this hour is Abby Phillip. Abby's career path led her to ABC News as a digital reporter for politics, followed by a tenure at the Washington Post as a national political reporter before joining CNN in 2017. At CNN, she initially covered the Trump administration and later ascended to senior political correspondent and anchor roles, notably moderating CNN's Democratic presidential debate in Iowa in January of 2020 and anchoring a special coverage of the 2020 election. I want to encourage every one of you within the sound of my voice to get her new book, A Dream Deferred, Jesse Jackson and the Fight for Black Political Power by Abby Phillip. Now, I have read every single book ever written about my father, including some very, very lengthy treatises about Dad's work. But none of them are so plainly written about what motivated, inspired the man, and what makes him tick. One of the things that I saw last night, oh, hi, Abby. One of the things that I saw last night was this. I thought about the treatment of Zohran Mamdani by the Democratic Party after his election victory. And I reflected upon what you wrote in the book about Dad's treatment, the Reverend's treatment in 1984 and 1988, even though he had inspired voter registration and brought new people into the process, just like Mamdani did in 2025 in the general election, but also in the primary election. There seems to be a reticence by Democrats to welcome new energy, new voters, young people into the process in whatever shape or form they may present themselves. Your thoughts on the basis of the reticence?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot, actually, not just since last night, but obviously in writing this book and also in covering similar candidates. When I covered the 2016 campaign, I was covering Hillary Clinton, but I was also covering Bernie Sanders because at the end of that campaign, they were locked in a primary fight. And then 2020, similarly as well. There is a reticence on the part of the political class to take risks. They do not like when candidates are not predictable, when they are outside of the realm of the known. And whenever you have a candidate like a Mamdani, a Bernie Sanders, a Donald Trump, a Jesse Jackson, they push up against the rules. And that always gets a reaction. Even last night, as we were on the air discussing this, and Mamdani gave his speech, and the reaction among, friends and colleagues who are part of the establishment was, he sounds angry. He wasn't conciliatory. He didn't reach across the aisle. And I said on the air and to them as well, it might be worth in this moment thinking about this a little bit differently. Because when you think about the reason that these candidates succeed, why voters vote for them, it is because they are different from the establishment. It is because they are fighting against the establishment on behalf of their voters. And so for him to present himself in a way that is designed to placate the people that he was running against, that would make no sense, practically or politically. And so I do think that there is a kind of mental block around that because everybody wants to be comfortable in what they know. And the very fact of candidates like this are in making the comfortable uncomfortable, the comfortable uncomfortable. And I think that is part of the politics of these types of political figures like your father, like Mamdani, like Bernie Sanders. I never went to a Bernie Sanders speech where he wasn't yelling into the microphone about how the system was rigged. Okay. I don't know if you can remember one, but I can't. And I know that drove people up the wall in 2016 and 2020. But guess what? That is exactly what voters wanted to hear. The voters that voted for him, that is what they wanted to hear. And so whenever I think candidates don't fall into a frame that feels familiar and comfortable, they get a lot of pushback. Why aren't they acting this way? Why aren't they reaching across? Why aren't they moving to the middle? And I would just suggest that maybe the reason that they aren't doing that is because they are elected to not do that. And in the same way that Donald Trump never moved to the middle after both of his victories, I think that tells the story. He ran on being the retribution for his voters, so on and so forth, and he never backed away from that. And that's what his voters wanted. And I think Democrats are much more likely to want to kind of, I think there's a belief in the Democratic Party, and I don't want to, I think I'm sure, Jesse, have your own views about this, but just as a political journalist, I can tell you Democrats believe that the only way to win is to be acceptable to what they believe is the median voter. And I do think that sometimes when that narrative gets challenged, they're not sure what to do. And historically, what they have done is they've iced out those candidates who don't fit that mold. And I think that that's what Jesse Jackson experienced in the 1980s. That's what Bernie Sanders experienced in 2016 and 2020. Now, that's what they tried to do with Mamdani, but New York was a different place, and he was able to win anyway, despite being completely iced out by the establishment.
Abby, I want to touch upon that transaction, the transaction where which confronted rejection in the case of Jesse Jackson, where he does all of the work, he generates the enthusiasm, he inspires the voters, he brings the voters to the process, and then when it comes time to earning a place at the table, if you will, on the ticket or at the seat of power, there is this arm's length treatment of Jesse Jackson. Of course, it came up against the very early rearing that you wrote about so brilliantly in your book. And then I saw this unprecedented voter participation and engagement by Mamdani in the New York campaign. We like the enthusiasm. We don't want to disrespect young voters. We want them in. But then there's this Muslim. There's this other guy that somehow we as Democrats, because he's not maybe the capitalist that we want him to be, but he certainly believes in the affordability and the quality of life issues that represent, but we don't want him. The rejection that the personalities feel, we want their contribution, Abby. We want what they bring to us as a party, but we don't want them.
Well, it's about control. And political parties are organizations that operate predominantly by being able to police the boundaries of their party. And so figures that push up against that are always going to have trouble in these organizations. I think that's a lot of it. You know, when it came to Reverend Jackson in the 80s, a lot of what happened with Mondale and Dukakis was that they just didn't trust him. They didn't think that they could manage him or control him. You know, going into the convention, they were like, what is he going to say? We need to know. We need to see a copy of the speech. And that is about control. And I do think that in a way, it's very normal to want to control people that are a part of your organization. That's how the top-down system works. But when they feel like they can't control the figure, but they want to kind of give some lip service to the supporters, they kind of ice out the person and give lip service to the supporters. And I would argue that has not worked. It didn't work in the 80s because I think people understood what was happening and they didn't kind of engage in the same way after Reverend Jackson was out of the race. I think it happened in 2016 as well. They didn't engage in the same way when the candidate is not being fully embraced by the party. And so I do think there's a cautionary tale in that. But, you know, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess when I look at what happened with the Republican Party and with Donald Trump, you know, I think what happened there is a little bit different in the sense that Trump was able to effectively overtake the Republican Party. He wasn't embraced by the Republican Party. He took them over. He used just raw political power to dominate the party, and now he himself is the party. And so that is a different model for how it can go. But historically speaking, among the Democrats who have tried this sort of outsider in strategy, the party often tries to keep the person at arm's length, but try to keep the voters engaged. They never quite get there. The voters are not ever fully engaged, and the whole thing falls apart. And that's the risk in this moment, as there's very clearly a lot of energy in the grassroots of the party for figures like AOC and Bernie and Mamdani. And the party is still kind of like, well, that's nice for New York, but I don't really think that there's anything that's exportable to the rest of the country. And they're going to have to figure that out between now and the midterms in 2028, because there are lessons for down the road for the Democratic Party and what candidate selection looks like, what the message should sound like, what things should be prioritized. And if they don't learn those lessons, they're going to find themselves really falling short.
You know, Abby, I know that I'm losing you in exactly 3 minutes at the hard stop of our show. I always ask my listeners and my guest to offer a word of hope. Abby Phillip, you are a you're a historic figure yourself. I mean, you are a young African-American, very, very talented woman, extremely well-educated and very qualified to do exactly what you do. Can you share with our listeners a word of hope?
Hmm. You know, I think that one of the things that is true in my life, and if you want to kind of make a connection here, also with what I learned in studying the life of your father, Reverend Jackson, is that there's something to be said for persistence in pursuing the things that you're pursuing, and I think that for me, um, that's been the main driving force of my career is just sort of sticking with it, even when you're in inhospitable environments. And I think that applies to each person as an individual. I think it applies to this sort of democratic project that we are in. A lot of people really want to give up on it. They think it is irredeemable in all these different ways. And I would argue that, you know, the heroes of our history who've really done the most to move us forward never gave up on this project. And so I think to me, it's two things that I want to convey, which is that in everything that you do as an individual, whether it's your career or your life or what have you, stick with it because time tells the story. And similarly, when we think about our politics, I think that in this democracy, it requires all of us to remain engaged, even when things are going up and down like a roller coaster, or, you know, we seem to be backsliding in certain ways. The engagement is what changes the narrative. It changes the story and it changes history. So that's the message that I have for people. I mean, that's what gives me hope. And I hope that people can find, you know, some reason to sort of feel optimistic about what we have yet to do in this great nation of ours.
Persistence, A Dream Deferred, Jesse Jackson and the Fight for Black Political Power by Abby Phillip. Let's get this one to the bestsellers list, everyone, and hopefully to the Pulitzer Prize. Abby, thank you for spending time with us today on the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Thank you so much. Great to see you. Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you again. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr., listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show on KBLA Talk 1580. More with Dr. S. Todd Yeary when we come forward. We're going to unpack our conversation with Abby Phillip. More when we come forward.
It's Afternoon Drive Time with Jesse Jackson Jr. Only on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Amber Payton with BIN News Now. Black Detroit City Council President Mary Sheffield has been elected mayor, making history as the city's first woman to hold the role.
Thank you for your support, your prayers, your trust, and your confidence, and for believing in a vision that we share for this great city.
She'll succeed Mayor Mike Duggan, who's running for Michigan governor in 2026. Syracuse, New York has elected Democrat Sharon Owens as its next mayor, making her the city's first Black mayor and second woman to hold the office. The current deputy mayor defeated 3 opponents and will succeed term-limited Mayor Ben Walsh. And a Buckhead Homeowners Association fund will upkeep the historic Piney Grove Cemetery, a Black burial site in Georgia with about 300 graves from the early 1800s. The Bluffs at Lenox HOA agreed to cover maintenance costs after a court ruling confirmed it was part of their rezoning deal. Get BIN News Now on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
Compassion sponsorship means food, healthcare, education, and most of all, being known, loved, and protected. There are thousands of kids waiting over a year. End their wait. Sponsor a child with compassion today. Text the word radio to 83393.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Lakers are back in action tonight at Crypto.com. They get their first look this season at Victor Wembanyama and a very improved San Antonio Spurs team. The Spurs are 5-1. The 7'5" Wembanyama leads the NBA in block shots and ranks second in rebounding. 7 o'clock tip-off tonight on ESPN. The USC women's basketball team won their season opener Tuesday night. The Trojans beat New Mexico State 87-48. It's going to be a very different season for the Trojans. They will not have All-American Juju Watkins for the entire season. Doctors advised the Compton native to sit out the season to give her right knee a chance to heal completely. Watkins suffered a torn ACL in the second round of the NCAA tournament in March. Without Watkins, the Trojans are not expected to be a contender for the national championship. The Trojans are ranked number 18 in the preseason top 25 poll. no debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
If you missed the recent Left Coast Forum, then you really missed out. An insightful presentation from Professor Richard Wolff, a call to action from LA Mayor Karen Bass, an insider's view on Prop 50 and the government shutdown from Congresswoman Sidney Kamlager-Dove, and as usual, Dr. Cornel West brought down the House with a powerful closing keynote. And many of the plenary sessions were standing room only. Check out our social media posts for photos and video of what you missed at the Left Coast Forum and make plans to attend one of our upcoming events. Our next Altadena Town Hall is Thursday, November 6th, 4 to 6 p.m. at Victory Bible Church in Pasadena. We're going to interrogate SoCal Edison's settlement fund and see what's really going on with this fire recovery program. And our KBLA Talk 1580 Community Health and Wellness Fair is Saturday, November the 8th, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. right here in Lemert Park at Catch at Audubon Middle School. All the details about these upcoming events can be found at our website, KBLA1580.com. So thanks again to all those who supported the Left Coast Forum, and a special thanks to our partners this year. The LA Progressive, the Empowerment Congress, Community Coalition, Southwest Voter Registration Education Project, Partnership for Growth, UTLA, LA Care Health Plan, Black Progressive Action Coalition, St. John's Community Health, the National Lawyers Guild, the Weingart Foundation, and the Liberty Hill Foundation.
KBLA Talk 1580.